Welcome back to the class, everyone. Today we have a very different subject to be talking about. We're going to be talking about a little bit of a look back into the year of 2022. For those of you who know, another content creator whose link will be down below in the description, Aldous Sandfly, went out there. He put out a survey asking a bunch of thorough questions about the year 2022 just so we could get a general idea of what the community at large is thinking. He's going to go over a lot of the things that came out specifically in the year, as well as some other ongoing topics that we've seen left and right here in Galaxy of Heroes. I think this data can be really useful because we can know really what percentage of the community thinks what is a general consensus, what is something that the minority is saying really loud, and really just it's kind of neat to see how many people are kind of in the same boat about certain topics. And really, I know they're not going to watch this, but I think this would be a really cool thing for CG to be behind, and it's nice to have data. So that being said, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. So first up, we need to see who actually filled this out. We're not going to list names of anybody. That kind of defeats the purpose of an anonymous survey. But here are the users. This is a little hard to read, but there are a few things that I'd like to point out. In the bottom left-hand corner, we can see that the vast majority of people who filled this out are in some fashion pay to play. They basically spent more than $50 of the game, or at least 78% of the people. 22% have spent less than 50. If you want to argue or not whether that's not free to play, go for it. I actually think there's a good argument, but just for the relevancy of the survey, this is who was responding. The vast majority of people too are between 8 and 10 million. So these have been players who've been playing for a pretty long time. In fact, we know that because they told us they've been playing for at least 5 to 7 years. You can see some other statistics here about the day one players, as well as some people who've been playing for 3 years. A very small margin here. And I will say, I think this isn't necessarily reflective of the player base at large, but really out where Aldous is, Sandfly, and as well as the community that he's a part of. He's constantly on Jedi Academy. He's pretty active on Discord and a few different servers. But again, these are similar homes that a lot of people are in. It might not be as wide or as vast to actually be able to hit the newer players, as the content creators say, AP gains. It's much more based towards the people who've been here for a long time. And I mean, that we have the data proof to do that, as assuming these people are telling the truth. That being said, let's find out what these people actually think. We're not going to go into every single little crevice of it, but what we do have right now is what did people like in 2022? And there's some pretty big takeaways here, and I don't think most of this is surprising. 76% of the people out there really liked Omicrons, and I get why. They let you use your whole roster without exactly breaking the game. Characters like Savage or Luminar all of a sudden become relevant because they are good in one game mode. Fulcrum and Johanna can say the same thing about Territory Wars. Makes a lot of sense. It is interesting to note that 25% of people don't like them. This wasn't the survey, one thing that I have heard a little bit, probably from this, I guess, minority, is that it really forces you to choose which game mode you want to play or which game mode you want to invest in. If you have a other problem with it, feel free to let us know in the comments. We're always up for knowing or learning more about what the community thinks. Next up, mod changes actually got 73%, and this really makes sense. This should be really high. In fact, I'm a little surprised it's not higher because there's nothing to really hate here. That the user interface actually just got easier. I guess things are more accessible, so maybe this is a high concentration of spenders that not wanting to share as much as the 60 slicing. Mod attenuators actually got lower than that. In this one, I get why it's as low as 64%, just because you can still roll the same stat that you got before. So I guess I'm giving my 2 cents on all of these as to why they're, whether I'm shocked or whatnot. Next up is TB. We're starting to get to, I guess, the negative of people who didn't enjoy it of 48%. This one, I think, is going to go higher throughout time. These survey results were taken at the very end of 2022 as a reflection of 2022. So this is very close to when it first came out, and I think one of the things that was still in the taste that was in a lot of people's mouth, including mine, was the ridiculous Relic 9 and Relic 8 cap on over half, or just half of the TB. Whereas now we're actually playing it, and pretty much that seems to be the only problem. The difficulty, for the most part, is pretty balanced. The art on the planets is just fantastic. The amount of characters that we need to get in certain places are pretty cool. The Reva event itself isn't that hard. So most of the territory, I think that one, if any of these are going to dramatically change, let's say 20%, I think it's going to be that one. I think the only really thing to hate about it is maybe beyond the relic gaps that keep us from going all the way to the end is going to be maybe just the overall time consumption, as that's something that's kind of wearing in at every point in the game. The web store got 29%. I get it. The two-factor authentication to get in when it first came out wasn't that great. The deals also seem kind of to be a missed opportunity. They could really be going, I think, 20% and still be making a larger profit than they would be in game. I don't really have a lot to say about that. And now here's where we talk about what everyone already knew. Datacrons have an approval rating of essentially 23.9% at the end of 2022. Not really, if honestly, I think if anything's a shock is that it's that high. We've grown to kind of like Datacrons. We're currently with set 5 and set 6, and they're okay for the most part. And I think if CG really wants to keep this, and we'll go over Datacrons actually a little bit more here in a second, but if they want the trajectory of that to go up rather than staying stagnant or just go down and players leave, they need to keep doing what they've been doing in set 5 and set 6, where a lot of the things are not just straight up overpowered, and the stats are things that we already are using with mods, specifically not dodge. I think if we get dodge again next season, because CG wants people to spend a lot of money to get on a really broken Datacron, that's going to stay the same or go below. And that's really not overall good for the health of the game. Omicron's mod changes, mod attenuators, this type of stuff is what we need to see, where the vast majority of the player base is coming in this with a positive reaction. I think TB will get there kind of on its own with where it's set, but Datacrons is the one that really needs to be nipped in the butt. One interesting takeaway, and I think this is probably one of the 3 most interesting takeaways, is there is 7% of the player base that's still playing that have enjoyed absolutely nothing, or at least nothing from those categories. And I do like to have this number because we can finally kind of cap this population. And I've had chats with people like this on Discord, and it's just a little concerning of why they kind of, I guess, continue to play the game. Criticism is always going to be there. I've criticized a number of these things in the list, but to get to the end of the year and say that you genuinely didn't like anything, I wonder if this was maybe a wake-up call or something like that, because seeing comments of the sort when we either get the shards get doubled or when our gear got doubled or things like that, for people to just kind of like, oh, okay, that's not enough. Really, we have these 10 other problems over here. And I would much rather run across, positivity in these areas, or even like what can be better about these areas. So knowing that it's only 7% is pretty nice. Next up, Datacrons. So we already mentioned them. Overall, their approval rating is super low, but there is one really good piece, or one piece of good news that we do have in store. First off, we have, this is all from the same amount of players. These are the exact same players that gave these essentially approval ratings in here. And this is how they ranked Datacrons when they first saw them. Again, this isn't different batches of people so that it can be manipulated. These are the same exact people in the same exact amounts. When the leak hit, a huge amount of people gave it a rating of 0. A small gave it a 1. A few gave it a 2. And you can kind of see the rest of how the majority of people rated it. I don't think anyone gave it a 10 after seeing what it was going to look like. They overall averaged a 3%, or not a 3%, they overall averaged a 3. Out of 1 out of 10, the majority of the players, you collect all their opinions together, it's a 3. It's a pretty big loss. Coming up, when they actually launched, and there were some pretty big changes between the leak and the launch, one of the biggest ones being, in the leak, we saw that to upgrade a Datacron, you needed to use relic salvage, which is really ridiculous. We already needed a ton of that, still need a ton of that, to be able to do a number of things in game. Unlocking our favorite characters is one of them, like Jabba. Why in the world would you push that in a temporary bonus? That being said, that alone and maybe some other things between when it launched, it brought their overall acceptance rating, I guess, with the community base as a 3.5. So we've gone up about 50%, or not 50%, but 0.50%. Overall, in going upwards, people aren't liking them less, and again, these are the same players. We're not comparing players who were here and then left, and then it went up because they're gone. And then now, again, as of when the survey was taken towards the end of the year, they actually have an overall rating of 4, this is good. We are moving in the right direction. We're going from 3 to 3.5 to 3.5 to 4. And like I was saying earlier, if CG can continue this trajectory with doing what they said they would do with Datacrons, which is they are going to change the meta of GAC in TW, very similar to how the modifiers in TB and Conquest change. We're looking to have the same exact thing happen in GAC, but just not on a scale that just destroys the enjoyment of it. Again, the biggest call out to this is dodge. There are some abilities here and there that I've also not been a fan of, but I think if they can continue doing what they've done, where they're mostly balanced and a few key characters really get to shine that were really don't get to shine elsewhere. Vader's the big one. I absolutely loved Vader. I know some people didn't because the infinite loops or whatever in CG said they were going to do that, and they did. And that's fair, but it was a lot of fun being able to play with him and being able to use him beat every single galactic legend. So if we leave out dodge, keep doing fun things like that, I think we could be at 4.5 by June, or 5% by the end of the year, or not 5%, but 5 at the end of the year. And hopefully just keep going in a positive direction rather than a negative direction. Conquest. So Conquest actually came out before 2022, but it had a lot of growth within 2022. So what we're looking at here right now, let's explain this data. The darker green bar here, this is going to represent players under 9 million, and the lighter green bar, this represents players over 9 million GP. This is something interesting to take note of. Overall, it has an average rating of 6 for players who are 9 million and over, and has an average rating of 4 for people who are under 9 million. And I think this has something to do with the overall identity of Conquest. When Conquest first came out, it was a fairly fun challenge that could be figured out for a lot of players, not just the huge endgame players, but a lot of the people that were in the middle. Anyone who could really pass the 4 million threshold, if they really applied themselves, they had a shot. CG decided, okay, no, you're going to have to try ridiculously hard if you're on the 4 or 5. And even if you are an in-game player, it's not going to be easy for you. It's going to be, and the keyword that we've been using for the entire existence is grindy. It's not just that you have to figure out these puzzles, it's that you have to do, I don't know how many, 30 battles a day. It's probably less than that, actually, something like 20 or 25. Continually going through that. And while it has a score of 6 out of 10, because it's not hard, it's just grindy, you just have to get through it, and the character you get is amazing. I think a lot of the reason why the people who are under 9 million are giving it a 4 is because it's not only grindy for them, it's actually hard and difficult, and there's a serious disconnect if they get the wrong data, or not data disc. For us who are at the higher level, data discs are really a question of convenience. All right, I got voluntary vanguard that's going to be able to help me get this feed. It's going to make that a lot easier. A lot of the people, again, under 9 million, probably even lower than 9 million, but say 7 or 6 million, whether or not you get the data disc, which is RNG, decides whether or not you get gold, or red crate, which decides whether or not you get the really good character that you want. So I don't know what the solution is here. I would like to just make it less grindy. Like, that seems like the perfect solution, but we know that CG, they want to hit their goals either with revenue, or really what Conquest, I believe, is time in game. Like, that's what they're going for. But then you still have this margin of player base who are giving a negative review. They do not like it as a whole. So that's something that we can take away from. This is more for fun, not really anything to glean off of here. Maybe there is something to learn, actually. So, favorite character in 2022, what everyone gave. 4% coming in last, and this isn't every single character, but these are the ones that made the highest amount, is Hondo at 4%. A little surprising. I think it's because he doesn't really have a home yet. Hopefully that'll go up with time. Jabba, overwhelmingly 33%. Huge. And I guess that's kind of ironic. But at first I was shocked to see it, and then I'm kind of looked back and remembered, I think the majority of our player base are original trilogy fans. I myself, I'm a primarily prequel fan. I have a huge love for Starkiller as well. It's a game that I played a lot growing up, which was Force Unleashed. But I don't really have this huge affiliation with Jabba, but it looks like a bunch of people do. And this makes me think, I don't know if CG's analyzing data similar to this of different categories of characters or how they categorize them. But I think if this is true and they're smart, even going back to some of the nuanced or strange characters from the original trilogy, I think is a good idea, at least from a monetization standpoint for them. Profundity got 12%. I think that's pretty clearly because it kills Executor, and it's glorious. It's very good. Ben Solo at 7. A little surprised he's that high. I personally like him a lot, but I heard a lot of griping because Starkiller still beats Rey, so he's quote-unquote useless. TIE Interceptor, it's a ship. I guess it can't be too high. Grand Inquisitor also makes sense. And then Adarad being at 5% is actually pretty good, because I think he might be Him and Hondo might be the only marquee characters here, which he's higher than Hondo. I would not have told you that. I would not have guessed that. And then Dr. Aphra, very cool character, but also a little bit of an obscure character. That is pretty much going to be the end of the data from here. Let me know what you guys think. I do think it's really interesting that Conquest for the lower players, it needs to change in some form. I don't think it is. Datacrons are going to continue to go in a positive direction as long as CG can hone on what's good about them, which is changing the meta and not just unleashing broken abilities that destroy a lot of the game. And overall, there is a lot of positive things about the game, even if a lot of the times it doesn't seem like it, being especially the mod changes that we had, Omicrons, and I think even the TB that's going to be going forward. But that is going to be it for today, guys. Thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe and stay awesome.